right.
Yep.
Well, hello, Men United. It is Taboo Tuesday. Pastor Isreal and myself, Aaron Bourne, and we are on here with you guys tonight. We wanted to get together and talk with you guys about, really about, we want to talk about our identity. We want to talk about shame. We want to talk about brokenness.
All that good stuff.
Yeah, all that good stuff. So we're one to really dive in, and hopefully you guys can see us okay. It looks like it may be a little blurry right here, but hopefully it'll clean up as we're going. But anyways, man, this isn't scripted. This isn't a message or a sermon. This is just Isreal and I getting together, just talking through some stuff about what God's been putting on our hearts and things that we are witnessing and experiencing both in our lives and the men that we talk to. If you guys don't know us, we both have been kind of radically pulled out of crazy backgrounds, crazy experiences. Our life used to look very different from the lives we live now, just like many of you, I'm sure. And because of that, it actually, God takes that and it's well suited for what we do now, because there's very little that shocks us, very little that catches us off guard. And I think our greatest challenge really is making sure that we have the proper filter in place before we have a conversation like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And our wives are nowhere around to correct us. So like this could be completely disastrous.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because it's like, my wife, the only advice she gave me was, Aaron, talk slow. She said, talk slow and think quickly. And so, but anyway, man, as you guys are jumping in, we're really glad you're here with us. And one of the cool things coming out of this COVID-19 is before, Isreal and I would probably just have a conversation one-on-one, and we wouldn't even think to invite everybody else into it with us. But right now we can think about, hey, let's invite our brothers in, let's invite our friends in, let's have this conversation together. And if you guys have questions and stuff, feel free to throw it in the comments, throw it in the chat. And we're just gonna kind of shoot from the hip tonight. So man, when you and I were talking earlier today, we were talking about really just how shame impacts us. And so, I mean, why don't you just kick it off with kind of, where we were earlier and kind of where we're going to go with this tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I think it all started when, and not to give any glorification to the enemy, because he didn't win, but one of the meetings got hijacked with some inappropriate content. And so, but such is life, right? I mean, how many times are we walking down the street and something passes in our field of view that is attractive or is giving off a lusty type of vibe, and it causes our imagination to run away with us? I mean, how many times are we sitting at our computer and all of a sudden a pop-up, and it not a pornographic pop-up, but maybe, I know in the summertime, like we do a lot of, be in Airbnb, and then so this thing will pop up and it's like a girl in the bikini with her husband, and I'm going, I didn't ask for that right now. Like I didn't do this. This is not my fault. And so life is full of pop-ups. The enemy is constantly trying to hijack our thought life. And we live in that environment. And so we accidentally step into these situations not knowing or not even having a discussion about it on how to handle these things. And so we kind of started talking, you and I, Aaron, like what does it look like to kind of prepare ourselves once we're mentally hijacked? Like, what does it look like on our part to be responsible for that and to not allow that thing to have the final say or control over our thought life? And as we're kind of thinking through this, I guess this 3-point list or whatever, we just really started talking about like shame. Yeah. And I think it's worth just discussing, and it may be just something we talk about tonight, and then maybe next Tuesday we go through the next 2 very simple points. But I think shame is huge. I think that immediately, as soon as that lustful image comes into our mind, or our brain does something sexual with something that God created to be beautiful, immediately shame comes in and starts to tell us lies about who we are. And I think it's worth talking about and mentioning in this conversation.
Yeah, I think, I think as I was talking about yesterday when I was on, for Momentum Monday. I was talking about the theme for the year was Sons of God. And that is our theme for the men of the church at Victory. And really, I think that's just a theme for men in general this year. Again, if you've been in church for a while, you've probably heard that term, what it means to be a son of God. But I think what gets in the way is shame is a major blocker of, okay, yeah, I hear that. That's great. You're telling me that if I believe in Jesus, I've been adopted, I'm a son. But that doesn't really feel any different because I know what happens in my head and I know what happens in my heart. And I don't feel like a son. I don't feel like I'm adoptable.
Right.
And it gets in the way. It gets in the way of our relationships with our wives. It gets in the way of us ever actually finding a healthy a healthy sexual relationship, a healthy marriage, because we're carrying all this baggage of who we think we are because of stuff that we've never dealt with inside.
Yeah. And I'm willing to bet, like, a lot of guys, and this is okay. There's no shame in this.
Yeah.
Hashtag. But I'm saying it's almost like there is this possibility that a lot of men came away from that meeting leading with that image still playing in their head, feeling embarrassed and shameful for that. And I think, the enemy's goal, I think, is two parts. I think, number one, he wants us to act out in our sin. The only way that the enemy can do that is to put this seed of thought into our mind and allow it to mature in the darkness. And then once it matures in darkness and secrecy and it gives birth, then that sin given birth to now equals death. And so, but I think what happens after that, and the death part isn't the sin. I think the death part is the shame and the effects of shame. I think once we sin, there's the enemy like applauding, going, look what I did. I caused this guy to stumble. I caused this guy to self-gratify or whatever it is that sin would cause him to do. But I also believe that what comes afterward is the death part is the shame that disconnects us from God, the shame that in our mind makes us believe and in our heart makes us believe that we're not worthy anymore, that we're no longer sons and daughters. Because technically speaking, the shame, it doesn't speak to our behavior. Shame speaks to our identity. Conviction speaks to our behavior. Conviction says, hey, that was wrong. That's not who you are. The Holy Spirit says, we know better than this. Come back and take place at your rightful place next to God. But shame and condemnation, it has a different dialogue with you. It says, you're not worthy. You should leave. You should run. So it doesn't address the behavior. It addresses the identity and says, this is who you are.
Yeah. I mean, you go back to the garden, right? Adam and Eve hiding because they know they've sinned. They're ashamed because they bit the apple. And that's really been the same episode on repeat for thousands of years since then. As we bite the apple, it's not just, like you said, it's not just that we did this is who we are. And then we go and hide. And it's a cycle. We hide from God. We hide from relationships. We hide from freedom. And we just keep running back into slavery over and over again. Because as long as shame can keep us weighted down, we're never going to throw that off. We're just going to keep in that cycle. Yeah. And so, and then it's just easier just to repeat the behavior because at least that feels safe and comfortable because you don't believe that freedom's even an option.
Right. And that's the thing. And like you talked about the garden, but I think that's real interesting. But like what they did was they disobeyed it was a heart perspective. Like, I don't think they were starving. I don't think they went after the fruit because they were like, God, like we're tired of everything else. I think they went after it because there was an issue of the heart. And so they sinned with their heart. And if you really want to be technical, they kind of sinned with their mouths. But what did they cover? Like, they didn't cover their mouth.
Right.
They didn't cover their chest where their heart is at. They covered their nakedness.
Yeah.
They covered their most vulnerable parts. They blocked their most vulnerable parts from being seen by each other and by God. And so there's that big, that fig leaf is basically shame. Shame is the current modern day fig leaf that separates us from being vulnerable with God and vulnerable with each other. And that right there, if you think about it for a second, I mean, it doesn't just go all across the board to like sexuality. It's in everything. It affects everything we touch and see and do.
I think it's crazy that, we've talked about this before. I think it's crazy that when God steps in the Old Testament to the Jewish people, he uses circumcision to mark them. You know,
Yeah.
That becomes the covenant as he places it on the one area where they were hiding and ashamed of. You know, they were covering their nakedness, and he says, I'm going to go past your nakedness, and I'm going to place my mark on you, and then that's going to be a sign of our covenant.
Yeah.
And I think for men, you know, we're not under the law, legalism as far as whether you're circumcised or not. But the fact is God goes right after the most private areas of our life. Mm-hmm. And he says, I want to place my covenant over that. I want to place my promise over that. So you can't hide. You can't just be, you know, show your face in church and then hide this area of your life. God wants all of you, and he wants to heal every part of you. And so he wants to speak to the stuff that's in, you know, your internet history. He wants to speak to the stuff that's in your head. He wants to speak to the stuff that you do on Friday night when you're not at church. He's want to go right into the very heart of it. And he doesn't leave any of it to chance. He doesn't leave any of it alone saying, just give me your tithes, or just serve here at church, or just read your Bible and that'll be enough. He wants to go to the very deepest parts of you that you've hidden from him, and says, I want to redeem that too. And
yeah. You know, going back to acting out, like we see an image and then we have a choice. We can act out on it, or we can surrender to God, and, you know, we have our whatever individual process that is. But I think that whether we act on it or not, shame still does this inner work. I think acting out is a form of expressing sin, but withholding that shame is a form of acting inward. Like you act out in sin, but shame is a form of acting inward. It's a form of self-hate where you're ruminating on that thing you saw and the guilt you feel from experiencing it. And I think the problem with just in general, men and women, I mean, whoever, but I don't think we see shame for what it is. I mean, I think we see it as a disease for the weak. Like it's like when we think of shame, we think of like the chubby kid who was made fun of about his ugly sweater, and he feels shame and runs home. And we're like, that's not me. That's not what I struggle with. But what we've done is in doing that, we've minimized shame to the point that we've empowered it all the more.
Wow.
And so we need to really understand like the power of what it does, and not to glorify it, but so that we can learn how to eradicate it and lean on each other and really understand that this is a universal problem we're all struggling with. I mean, it is the great driver of unwanted behavior and addiction. Shame it's not just embarrassment or self-disgust, but it's the foundation of disconnection and isolation. And honestly, it even has some expressions that aren't so dark. It can also express itself through perfectionism. Yeah. It can also express itself through, you know, saying, I'm going to do the best job ever. It can even express itself through competition, where you walk into a room and rather than adding to the life of people, you feel like you need to compete and consume with every other stout, buff dude in the room. You know, you're constantly surveying to see who is the alpha dog in there. Who do you need to conquer to maintain your reputation in the room? And so I think when we start to see it from that perspective, I think if we see the danger of it, all the more we become acute. We become aware and alert. Our ears perk up a little bit. And now we're like, I want to identify that in me so that I'm not walking away, letting shame do its inward work in me, so that I'm not acting out on shame, and so that I'm not secretly allowing the work of the enemy to ruminate in my heart and in my thought life. So I kind of just thinking, and I was like, well, what are like, it's really hard for us to identify shame because men don't sit around going, let's identify a feeling. Like no one goes, hey man, you want to come over and identify feelings with each other? Dude, I'm so there. Like, and then we're gone. Like
no, we are angry and happy. Those are the only two we get.
Hungry and not hungry.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I mean, so I think, and typically what you do to identify like the root cause of something is you basically talk about an emotion or a feeling. Now this is, guys, like stay tuned. Like this is good stuff. Like it'll add game with your wife. Like I'm just telling you. And for those that don't have a wife, like you'll find one. Like just with this.
Yeah, take notes.
So like if you can identify a feeling or emotion, and interrogate it well enough, you can identify kind of like the culprit behind it.
Yeah.
And so if you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and look at what you're feeling, and chase it down a little bit, okay, you can start to identify there's some shame at work.
Yeah.
And so what I've done is, instead of saying shame, 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 and then in our mind we go, okay, so I'm the little overweight boy with the ugly sweater that gets made fun of, and then we dismiss that. Instead of thinking that, let's start thinking about what are other ways that shame like does its work in our lives. But we've got to start talking about some feelings. So here's some feelings that pop up, and if we interrogate these feelings, what will be revealed is the culprit of shame. And these are some common feelings I think we as men all struggle with and deal with. And I think this is one, for me, it's number one. Anytime that there's been me grappling with lust, anytime that I hear someone else grappling with lust, one of the first things that they will say in an honest conversation, one of the feelings that they will say that leads to shame is this: it makes men feel unqualified to lead.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, their right to lead has been forfeit. Now, here's where this becomes a problem, especially if you're in a culture and all they're teaching is leadership, 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 leadership.
Yeah. Yes.
And now you're struggling with lust.
Yeah.
So you will go ahead.
You have to either be a hypocrite and you just lead through it, or you just step back and don't do anything. And you look not just in our churches, but look at our world. Look at American society.
Yeah.
Finding godly men that are willing to step out in leadership, man. Yeah. Who can find them?
And everybody, and here's the thing is about leadership right now. It's kind of the thing that people they want to be known for the way that they lead. They want to be known for the way that they take charge. They want to be known for the way that they pave their way through society, where they can invite people to come along behind them. I mean, and anything that threatens that, they're like, no way, man, I'm not going to like lead with my weakness.
Well, they want to lead from a distance, though, Isreal. They want to lead on a platform because I don't have to let you get too close to me, and so I can kind of control my image. I can control how much you know of me, so my shame and stuff can still stay in here because I'm just leading from social media, or I'm leading from a platform from a distance.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I mean, it puts them at risk to not be ahead, to run with the bulls, to run with the key leaders in our culture. And so it just makes them say, yeah, I'm not saying anything. And which leads to the second thing, the feeling of I don't measure up.
Yeah.
I think that is, both are kind of the same, but I think that when I don't measure up as a husband, when I don't measure up as a father, when I don't measure up as a speaker, and honestly, like, think about your gift, whatever that God has called you to be gifted to, whether it's speaking, leading, ministering, leading your small group, maybe just leading in your job, being an influencer. I mean, immediately what shame does, it attacks the thing that you're called to do and says, you're not good at this. You're not good at this. It's you don't have the degrees. Look at you trying to write you can't write this book. Look at you trying to start a podcast. Look at you trying to do this YouTube channel. Look at you trying to start a small group. You can't do this. So it really just makes you feel like you don't measure up to the next guy. And honestly, I'll tell you this: if I wanted to create division, I would make men be intimidated about other men in an organization. And the best way that I could do that is infiltrate their brains and make them think that none of those guys in that room measure up to each other. I mean, think how unhealthy of an organization that would be if every person in that room just thought that they'd never measured up.
And so typically they just overcompensate.
They step on each other's toes. They become territorial.
Yep.
They become. I mean, they wear their inadequacy in their sleeves and their actions. Here's another thing that I think it does is, like, let's say you're at Piedmont Park and you're running, and then some person like somehow gets in front of you, and they're wearing like yoga pants, and so that immediate thought, what that typically does is it makes a person feel spiritually weak. Like, it just makes that person go like, you know what? I'm not. And I've had guys tell me this. It's like, so this beautiful girl sat down at a Starbucks and I saw she was beautiful. Dude, I'm not healed. I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? What did you do? Like, did you do something wrong? Like, what else did you do? Like, what? How does this story end, dude? I mean, you know, no, I just thought she was attractive. And like, I was tempted to think about some things. And then I just, man, I'm not there. And I'm like, well, I think that there's some stuff to talk to God about, definitely and for sure. And I think that there is some personal coaching you can take when you take that thought and you hold it to yourself and you collect it, but you don't surrender it. I think there's some, but I don't necessarily think that makes you a weak person. And so there's some other stuff that we can talk to about that. Maybe we can, if anybody has any questions about that.
But to your point though, Isreal, I think you got so many men believing that, I mean, what I've said over and over again, I think the biggest struggle for men is isolation.
Yeah.
And the reason why it continues is because just bringing it all full circle is just because of shame. And so, with Men United, I mean, even the name of the ministry is we're just trying to bring men out of isolation, uniting them with Jesus, uniting them with their purpose, uniting them in brotherhood, and uniting them with their families and their marriages. Because men may be married, they may be in church, they may even be leading, but still living these completely isolated lives because of that internal shame. And so the whole point of everything, the whole point of what we're doing is if we can get you out of that shame and step out of isolation, then that's when you can break the lie and the cycle of you believing that and actually begin to experience some healing. But as long as you are kept in the shadows, kept in the closet, and believing that track and playing it on repeat, man, nothing's ever going to change.
Yeah.
And so that's why this is so important. And I know that we could, go on very deep about this for a long time, man. But I'm looking forward to the fact that, at least for the future, we're going to be getting together like this on Tuesdays at some point and just having this conversation. So if you're live with us, awesome. If you come on later on and you want to play it back and see it, man, we hope this is a blessing for you. And we'd love to see kind of your comments and the conversation that takes place, in the chat here on the video. But, man, this has been good tonight. And I'm looking forward to talking more about this. And again, guys, if this brought up something in you, man, don't hesitate to message us or comment us. Let us pray for you. Let's get you connected with the men's group. There are a lot of men in this church at Victory and in this community that love you, that want to see healing for you. If Isreal and I are here talking about it, it's because we both experienced it and we know exactly what it feels like. And so we don't want anyone living under that weight on their neck anymore.
Hey, Aaron, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, man.
So one more thing that I felt like I really needed to say this about shame and how it makes us feel. But the one thing that I think that really shame does, and this is an identifier of shame, but it's when we see something and our lust buttons are pushed, the reminder that your sin is still there, and like a psychotic ex-girlfriend, your sin is waiting to have you back. Yeah. That's also a product of shame. And so I think that we all go through that. Every single time that our lust is provoked, we're reminded of the simple fact that the door of sin is always open to us. And we're always one choice away from it. Wow. And I really feel like that's something that needed to be said tonight too. Yeah. And so just thoughts to think of and to process in small groups and with each other and on this thread. Yeah. And that's a normal thing. I think we all deal with that. So tonight, as we're kind of bringing everything to a close, anything you want to leave the guys with before we sign off tonight? Yeah, I think, one of the things that I always think about is anytime that you're feeling that shame and condemnation, the best thing you can do is to say, and if you're feeling these things, again, it's a telltale sign that there is shame at the root. Yeah. So simply it's this, dude, go to God with that shame. Like simply go to God. There's so many things you can do, but the number one thing you can do is this. Go to God with that shame and just simply offer it to him and say, Lord, this is what is at the root of my feelings. And most of these feelings aren't true. But what is true and what needs to be dealt with is the shame that is at the baseline and it's still thriving. And Isaiah 54:4 says this, and I'll kind of read it here. And I love it. It's in the NIV. But it says this, do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. And I think this is addressing every single thing that shame does to us. And so unless we deal with this through God, through Jesus Christ, and apply the love of Jesus in our life, we're going to wrestle with this until we give it to the Lord. And so I love this list here, that this is the cure. This is what it's going to cure. And it says, do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. You will not fear disgrace, which is what we're all worried about. Men, what is our thing? Honor. What's the opposite of honor? Disgrace. Yep. Okay. What's the one thing we want to be noted for? Our strengths. What's the opposite of that? It's this next verse. You will not be humiliated. Wow. So what God is saying is this: come to me. Do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. Do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth. Dude, that's good. So whatever image is running around in here, once you approach the presence of God, it becomes gone. Okay? And we can talk more about that later. And remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. Now, I know guys are like, widowhood, wait a minute, I'm off there. Widowhood simply means this, that you have been forsaken. Yeah. That something has happened to you where you have been forsaken. And God is saying this, no more forsakenness. Shame drives us to feel the fear of being forsaken. And so once we go to God with this honestly and openly, he drives out that disgrace. He drives up the fear of humiliation, and we forget the image. We forget the fear, or I guess we learn how to conquer the fear of being abandoned and left. But there's so much more to that. I don't want to get into all that. Yeah. But simple scriptures.
Pick back up on that verse next week because there's so much there to pack with that. Yeah. That's good stuff, man. That's really good stuff. So, man, especially when you start talking about guys' need for respect and everything else and the shame that comes with it, man, that's a whole nother talk. So, man, I'm looking forward to doing this. This is fun. And we'll hopefully we'll pick it right back up next Tuesday. So, guys, thank you for joining us, man. Again, like I said, feel free to hit us up if you have any questions about this or you want to talk about it deeper. But, man, you guys have some good rest. Go spend some time with your families or unwind or whatever it is you need to do. Man, cast that stuff off you, man. Don't carry that shame with you tonight. And I just pray blessings over each and every one of you in Jesus' name. And we'll see you guys later next. We'll actually see you here tomorrow morning for devotions. We have our Anthony Taylor from our Hamilton Mill campus is going to be leading a Bible study early tomorrow morning. So if you guys want to jump on and catch that. Man, we'll see you guys again soon. Thanks a lot and have a great night.